I rise today in support of Amendments 1125 and 1126, which have been offered by the Intelligence Committee Chairwoman, Senator Feinstein. While the Senate did not pass my amendment that would have instructed the Senate to consider these detainee matters separately from the Defense Authorization Bill, I believe that Senator Feinstein's amendments make important changes and improvements to the bill, improvements that may yet avoid a problem with a presidential veto. So, Mr. President, and I thank the presiding officer for his comments yesterday on the detainee provisions that are in this proposed legislation. I want to urge my colleagues to support these amendments, and I want to be clear, I intend to support them. Now, I have serious concerns going forward about the unintended consequences of enacting the detainee provisions in Subtitle D of the Defense Authorization Act. These amendments help to alleviate some of my concerns. And I would like to, in the context of the debate we're having, note that in addition to the Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta, the Director of National Intelligence, General Clapper, and FBI Director Mueller, who all oppose the detainee provisions, CIA Director Petraeus's senior staff has indicated that they too oppose the detention provisions. The CIA believes that it's important to preserve the current U.S. government's prosecution flexibility that has allowed both the Bush and the Obama administrations to effectively combat those who seek to do us harm. After the vote yesterday, I had a chance to talk, Mr. President, with a number of members on the other side of the aisle, and frankly on the other side of the debate, because had bipartisan support on both sides of the debate. But the folks I talked to told me they didn't support my amendment, but they were still interested in making some more targeted changes to the detention provisions. And I hope that those colleagues will take a close look at what Senator Feinstein is offering here today. Let me speak to specifically what she would help resolve with her amendments. There are two important shortcomings that still exist in the current bill. One of her amendments would preserve the flexibility of the military, law enforcement, and intelligence agencies to collaborate without undue limitation in any investigation, interrogation, and prosecution of suspected terrorists. The other amendment would make it clear that American citizens cannot be held indefinitely in military detention without trial. And again, I know the presiding officer spoke powerfully to that very legitimate and important concern yesterday. The current language in the bill, which is why I took to the floor yesterday and on a number of other occasions to make this point, I believe will disrupt the investigation, interrogation, and prosecution of terrorist suspects by forcing the military to interrupt what the FBI, the CIA, or other counterterrorism agency operations against each of these organizations' recommendations, including the military's. In sum, we're going to create an unworkable bureaucratic process that would take away the intelligence community and the counterterrorism community's capabilities to make critical and in some cases split-second decisions about how best to save Americans' lives. And further, Mr. President, I can't emphasize this enough. Although my friends on the other side of the debate argue otherwise, the detainee provisions do allow for the indefinite military detention of American citizens who are accused of planning or participating in terror attacks. Simply accused. That cuts directly against values that we hold dear. Innocent until proven guilty, presumption of innocence. That's why this is such an important debate. Now, let me be clear. There are American citizens who've collaborated with our enemies. There are American citizens who participated in attacks against our soldiers and civilians. Those Americans are traitors. They should be dealt with. And we already have a system for ensuring that they're brought to justice and made to pay a very heavy price for their crimes. And that system is working. However, even in the darkest hours, we must ensure that our Constitution prevails. we do ourselves a grave disservice by allowing for any citizen to be locked up indefinitely without trial, no matter how serious the charges may be against them. Doing so may be politically expedient, but we risk losing our principles in justice and liberty that have kept our republic strong, and it does nothing to make us safer. Our national security leadership has even said that if we implement these provisions, it could make us less safe. Mr. President, if I might reflect a bit on what we've learned, at least in three different wars, three wars that we all learn about in our history classes, the Civil War, World War I, and World War II. As we look back at those three wars, we made the decision and we drew the conclusion as Americans that we overreached, that we constricted civil liberties. President Lincoln limited habeas corpus in the Civil War. I know the presiding officers are familiar with the Palmer raids during World War I and the aftermath of World War I. Of course, we know all too well the history of the internment of Japanese Americans. I'm not suggesting that these provisions, as they're now included in the bill, would result in historians drawing those similar kinds of conclusions 10 or 20 or 30 years from now. But why not be safe? Why not take the time to ensure that we keep faith with those core values that make America what it is? That's all I'm asking. I think that's all that Senator Feinstein is asking for us to do. That's what the 38 senators who joined us yesterday to vote for my common sense approach were saying as well. So in sum, Senator Feinstein has introduced some small changes that would help alleviate some of the justifiable concerns with these provisions. As I have said, I continue to worry that there will be unintended consequences to enacting the detainee provisions altogether. However, we can make some of these small improvements to avoid harming our counterterrorism activities and preventing the loss of rights and freedoms granted to all Americans by our Constitution. So in closing, Mr. President, I urge all of our colleagues to support Senator Feinstein's amendments.
President.
Senator from Arizona.
Mr. President, just briefly while my friend from Colorado is on the floor, he said, take the time. We've been taking time, I tell the senator from Colorado, since September 11, 2001, when the United States of America was attacked. We passed the Detainee Treatment Act. We've passed other pieces of legislation, the Patriot Act, others. Take the time. I say in all due respect that we have taken a lot of time. In fact, hundreds and hundreds of hours of debate, discussion as to how to address this threat to the United States of America. Now, if the senator from Colorado supports the Feinstein amendment, I agree with that. I cannot agree that we have not taken the time. I personally have taken, I cannot tell you, untold hours addressing this issue of how we treat detainees. And we may have a fundamental disagreement, but I do reject the argument that we haven't taken the time. I yield the floor.
Would the senator respond to a questioner? I have, as the senator knows from Arizona, I have utmost respect for the time that you've spent in this very important area. I think what I've been trying to say is that in regards to this particular set of detainee provisions, I want to ensure that all of the questions that the FBI director, General Clapper, Secretary Panetta, and others have raised about how these provisions would actually be applied. I have no question that the intent is spot on. I just am aware that there have been some concerns raised about how these new provisions would actually be applied. And I think Senator Feinstein's amendments, and I don't know where the senator from Arizona stands at this point, may provide some greater clarification. I know there have been some conversations on the floor as to how we will deal with these amendments. So I appreciate the senator's comments. And
I thank the senator from Colorado's clarification, and I think I understand more clearly the rationale for his support of the amendment. I yield the floor.
President, I yield the floor as well, and I note the